How you doing, Terrence?
What's up, Matt?
Nothing much. I just wanted to ask you a few questions about the Afghanistan situation, given your military history and stuff. So I want to start off today asking you, what made you want to go into the military and more specifically the Marines?
So that's actually kind of a funny story. Initially, so we'll backtrack to my junior year, which I think was like 2008, 2009. I had already known probably by the age of 13, I was going to go into the military. Like I'd watched my sister do it. I'd watched my brother do it. I remembered 9/11. So I'm like, well, I'm going to do it too. Yeah, that's just what I want. Screw high school. I'm going to the military. I just need to make it out of high school and then I'm good as gold. So long story short, I was all set up to go to the Army Reserves. I was going to do their split option, which was you finish your junior year and then during the summer you go to boot camp for the Army, come back and finish your senior year. And then after you graduate high school, you check into your unit and do any more training. So I had signed all my paperwork. I had finished all that and I was just waiting to go to boot camp that summer. Long story short, I got into a fight with some kid, somebody trying to bully me. And I ended up winning that fight to the point of he went home that day and then I got suspended from school. The fight happened on a Tuesday, Matt. On a Saturday, I had a cop at my door saying, "We have a warrant for your arrest. You're being charged with assault." I'm like, "Oh, really? For a high school fight?" And I was 17 at the time, and this is in New York State. So they take me into custody. They bring me into the courtroom for an arraignment. And the judge says, yeah, we're going to charge him as an adult. And it's going to be assault in the second degree, which it's a step down from first degree assault. So go to the courtroom, hear all that, start literally crapping myself because I'm like, great, 17 years old and I'm about to go to county. And the officer that was in the courtroom with me, I looked at him and they also posted $1,000 bond. So I'm like, great, I'm gonna get $1,000. I look at the officer in the courtroom, like, what happens if I don't pay bond? He's like, you go to county. I was like, oh, great. So I know I got to make a shiv when I get there. It's the first thing on my mind. Long story short, I got bonded out. My dad came and got me. Parents weren't mad. They're like, hey, as long as you fought for the right reasons, we'll get a lawyer. We'll take care of it. The summer that I was supposed to be in boot camp, I had to stay in New York and go through court the entire summer. I had to be in court every other week. And I notified my Army recruiter of this, and he's like, oh, don't worry about it. We got rid of your contract. You're out of the Army. We'll just, as soon as you're done with your court proceeding, we'll pick up the paperwork and we'll do it again. Like, all right, great. Finish court, Matt. September rolls around. So you're figuring May, June timeframe, get arrested. September rolls around, senior year. I get a letter in the mail from the U.S. Army headquarters saying that you've been AWOL, absent without official leave. They've basically said you're a soldier that's been missing for X amount of days. You need to check in or we'll issue a warrant for your arrest. And the unit I was supposed to check into was about 2 hours up the road. And my mother, being a military brat, she's like, we need to go to your unit and we need to talk to the commanding officer. So I show up there and he's like, where the hell have you been? We've been expecting you for months. I was like, I've been in court. Have you not talked to my recruiter at all? And he's like, well, who the hell is your recruiter? I was like, oh, great. He ended up getting orders out in California and he hightailed it. He was in New York where he recruited me. He hightailed it back to Cali.
Why?
And he was just MIA. Is shiesty stuff of recruiters. You hear the horror stories of recruiters, and that's the stuff that ends up happening is stuff like this. He's like, no, your packet was submitted and we've been expecting you to go to boot camp and then check in and you haven't. I was like, all right, whatever. Gave him all the court documents and like, this is what's been happening. Long story short, Matt, I ended up getting a, other than honorable, or no, what was it? Oh, a generalized, it's other than honorable under generalized conditions, basically an administrative separation from the Army. So when you pull up my military record, I've served in the Army, I've served in the Marine Corps, and then the Air Force. But long story short, the Army ended up giving me that discharge. I was officially out of the Army, and I'm like, well, great, I can't go back to the Army. So I literally told my mom, I'm like, well, screw it, I'm going to the Marine Corps. And I walked into a Marine Corps recruiter's office. He was sitting in the chair. I'm like, oh, I'm here to sign up. He's like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to do infantry. He's like, have you been arrested? Do you have any charges? I'm like, I showed him the whole packet, that thick, Matt, of documents and records. And he's like, you want to do infantry, right? I was like, yeah. He's like, perfect. We got you. That's fine. He's like, as long as you don't want to do anything that requires a huge security clearance, he's like, you're good. But yeah, you'll be fine for the infantry if this is the case, why you're getting in trouble.
So
and that's how.
Your start in the military is wild, man. That is a
Oh yeah.
situation. I've never heard anything like that before. That's insane.
Oh yeah. I literally have my Army contract. I've got the Army contract and the discharge paperwork. And I keep all that because Uncle Sam never forgets. And I'm like, with my luck, they would come back with something. It's been well over 10, 12 years or whatever. So it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if they came back and said, hey, by the way, you still owe us some time, buddy.
Yeah.
Come on back. And like, no. So that was my first intro to the military. And I should have taken a hint, like, of just how messed up things can get. But I didn't. But that's how I ended up in the Corps. Initially, if everything had panned out correctly, I would have went to the Army. I would have commissioned as an officer because that was my goal. That's why I joined the Army Reserves. But and I probably never would have ended up in Afghan had everything panned out.
As far as your time in the Marines, what does the timeline look like? And then where do you spend the majority of your time in the Marines?
So my timeline looks like I signed a contract, graduated high school in June, and what was happening with the Corps, June of 2010, graduate high school. I want to say a couple months before that, when I walked into that recruiter's office, I was we had to do a lot of paperwork. He had to meet with my lawyer, and because that case was still so fresh, he's like, we need all the documentation to make sure you are covered so you can go through processing and get in. And then what happens in the Marine Corps is the Marine Corps is the smallest branch, and they're like, listen, this year we've only got 1,000 open spots nationwide for people who want to be infantry or people who want to be engineers. Their spots are numbered. They are finite amounts. And what recruiters will try to do is like, well, hey, Matt, we know you want to be a refrigerator mechanic, but we don't have any spots open for that. So why don't you go open contract? Anybody that knows anything about the Marine Corps, you don't go open contract, because what that means is you will go to boot camp like everybody else, but when you finish boot camp, the Marine Corps will put you where they need you. Excuse my language, but that could mean you're a shit shoveler for the next 4 years. Literally, open contract means you are telling the Marine Corps, pick my job for me. And my recruiter was like, well, we can get you an open contract. I'm like, no, I am going to wait until you come to me with an 03XX contract, infantry contract. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere until I get what I want. I waited 6 months to sign my papers. I signed my papers, I think 2 or 3 months beforehand. And then April of 2011, I'm on the bus to Parris Island. And that's where it all started.
Where is Parris Island?
That is in South Carolina. Anybody who joins the Marine Corps, if you are recruited east of the Mississippi, you go to Parris Island. If you are recruited on the west side, you go to, San Diego. You go to San Diego, and we call them Hollywood Marines. we always make fun of them because like, you're not real Marines. Real Marines are bred at Paris Island. Everybody knows Paris Island. Anybody that's seen Full Metal Jacket knows it's Paris Island is where it all happens.
I've only seen the bit where the guy goes crazy and then it goes over to Vietnam,
And believe it or not, though, that does happen in boot camp. When I was there from April of 2011 to July of 2011. That's how long I was there. My senior drill instructor was telling us, I think he said a few months prior to us showing up, you go to the rifle range to qualify, and they said some kid had literally loaded his rifle and just shot himself on the firing line. Just
wow.
No warning. The kid literally loaded up and shot himself. Paris Island, when you hear those stories of, they literally take you as a civilian and they don't break you down. They completely wipe your slate clean and they build something new. They're not in that HGTV business of renovating houses. No, they tear the old one down and build the new one, mentally and physically. So there are kids that just aren't built for that type of environment. At night, you hear kids crying in their beds, and just you see the kids dropping out left and right because it's just a mental fatigue type deal, and some kids just can't do it.
So you start out in the Marine Corps kind of at this Paris Island place. Where do you go from there? And then how long does it take you to get to Afghanistan, or is Afghanistan right away?
So what usually happens, and I can speak from the infantry perspective, and then you kind of go into how other jobs process, but you go to Paris Island, which is your boot camp. Everybody goes to boot camp 3 months. And once you finish boot camp, normally you go home for like 2 weeks. You see your family, hang out, decompress a little bit. And then for the infantry, we report to the School of Infantry in Jacksonville, North Carolina, just an hour up the road from Wilmington. And there, for infantry Marines, you're there for another 2.5 months learning weapons and infantry tactics. That's your job. People who aren't infantry, they will still go to the School of Infantry, except it's called, I don't know if it's called it this anymore, but they called it MCT, which is Marine Combat Training. That's for everybody that's not an infantryman. You're getting I think it's like a 30 or 40-day crash course on combat tactics. Because you've always heard that term, every Marine a rifleman. Well, every Marine needs to have some sort of foundation in terms of combat training. If you're a refrigerator mechanic, the only combat training you'll ever have is what you got at MCT right after boot camp. But you'll never forget it. But you as a non-infantry Marine would do your time at MCT, and then you'll get sent off to your actual school. Whether it's aircraft mechanics or whatever it is, then you'll go to your school. Whereas infantry Marines, they stay at the School of Infantry. We are there. And it's actually not just going to the field and digging holes. It's actually a formal school. We've got our time out in the field. We have our time going to the ranges and shooting live ammo. There's a lot of classroom time. Literally, some of the longest days I've had there in training were in class, sitting there for 8 hours. Imagine being in a lecture for 8 hours.
Oof. Mm-mm.
And what they're doing, like for instance, me being a machine gunner, I specialize in machine guns. I spent so much time in the classroom learning about not only how to employ the machine gun, how to use it, but the nitty gritty stuff, learning the name of every part, learning the function of the tiniest like bullshit screw that falls off the gun. You learn every aspect of that weapon. And that's how every infantryman's tailored. The riflemen know everything about their job. The mortarmen know everything about their job, but you're living your job for 2.5 months. So it becomes ingrained. And then what happens once you're done training at SOI, you'll graduate SOI, they'll hold like a little graduation. And then literally they're like, all right, everybody get outside, get into formation. Buses are going to be coming. you're going to your units. It's like cattle. We've got you ready, but now you're going to the slaughterhouse. And what happens is somebody in a bus comes, picks you up, and then they take you to your base, whether it's because once you leave SOI, you could go to California. You could get sent to Hawaii. You could get sent straight to Okinawa. I got Camp Lejeune, so I left SOI, Matt, and I took a 5-minute bus ride up the road. And they're like, all right, welcome home. This is your new house for 4 years, Camp Lejeune. And I'm like, oh, great. It still sucks here.
Yeah, you didn't get stationed in Hawaii.
No, I had a lot of my buddies. They were the tow gunners, which are like anti-tank rocket men. All of those guys from our class got sent to Hawaii right off the bat. And they all loved it. But
so you go from, it was the camp in South Carolina. What was that?
Parris Island.
Parris Island, and then you go to your SOI where you kind of learn what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, correct? You and SOI is a little complex because, and we're going to speak from the perspective of infantrymen. SOI, what ends up happening is the first month you learn how to be a rifleman. You learn basic infantry tactics, and then they have something called the weapon split. They literally say, listen, if you want to be a rifleman, stand on this side of the parking lot. If you want to be a mortarman, go to that corner. If you want to be a weapons or a machine gunner, go to that corner. This is where the first month we all lived together, 100 guys lived together. Now you're breaking up and you're learning the specialization of your field. I went machine guns and literally I am below average for size for a machine gunner. I am a mouse. People of my size don't do machine guns because it is meant for your standard issue G.I. Joe looking dude. Your big guy who can put 200 pounds on his back and just keep on moving like a mule. But I wanted machine guns. And the reason why I wanted machine guns, Matt, was I wanted to be on the 50 cal because I literally told my recruiter, I want to be on top of a Humvee with a 50 cal and just laying down hellfire downrange. And then when they see me get out of that truck, they're going to be like, that little dude is what was giving us all this hell. That's literally what I did. I said to my recruiter, I'm like, I want to be that little guy that they're like, he was causing all that trouble for us. I'm like, hell yeah, I was.
So how do you get to Afghanistan from here?
So what happens is every Marine Corps unit, and we're going to speak for the infantry, they have rotation during the midst of a war. There is a rotation going on, so, they might say, 2nd Marine Division is out there right now. They're going to be out there for 8 months and then we're going to rotate, send a different unit to replace them and they come home. My first deployment was in 2012. I checked into my unit. I left SOI and checked into my unit in September of 2011. Well, when I got to my unit, and units know their deployments ahead of time, at least, 6 to 9 months out, at least they know that they're leaving and going somewhere. Well, they do a workup. You are in a training evolution that is getting you ready for that upcoming deployment. We were on a MEU, which is a Marine Expeditionary Unit, which surprisingly enough, the whole incident in Kabul was covered by the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit. That was the unit I was with on my first deployment. And we can actually get into something about that later. But long story short, you get on a boat and you sail off into the sunset. We ended up going into the Mediterranean. We were hanging around, we ended up in Kuwait. I did some time in Italy. We did training in Jordan. We were out there hanging around the Middle East for a while, floating around on this boat. But when you show up to your unit is in the midst of training at Camp Lejeune to get ready for this deployment. So that's what happened when I showed up. I was literally in the middle of a training cycle, which is an extension of, all right, we're going to go in the woods and play G.I. Joe for a little bit.
Okay.
So yeah, show up in September of 2011. They're training all the way up until March of 2012. And March of 20 York, which was a great honor for me because that was her first deployment out on open water. The USS New York was the ship that was built from the steel of 9/11.
Wow, that's awesome.
And this was her first maiden voyage, her first deployment, carrying Marines, going out into the free open world. And that's why we stopped at all these different ports in all these different countries, because the captain of the boat said, we're going to show her off. We're going to go port to port. You guys are going to have some time off, go get some drinks. So that's why I saw the world, because not only because they had other ships in our fleet, the USS Iwo Jima, the Gungston Hall, those are all different ships. They didn't stop at many Liberty ports as we did. But the captain of the boat, he's like, no, we're showing the ship off. It's the Navy's newest ship. It's the USS New York. It's the ship built from the steel of the Twin Towers.
Yes, and 9/11 is sort of the whole reason we were over there in the Middle East. So you definitely got
9/11 is literally the match in the powder keg that is the global war on terror. You know, every Marine who spent 30 days in the fleet or at his unit, you're no longer in training, you're at your unit. That's what we call in the fleet. You're in your unit, you're operating. When you're in your unit for 30 days, you get a ribbon that's called the GWAT, the Global War on Terrorism ribbon, because it's not considered an actual war per se, but you're part of an operation. It's a worldwide operation, the GWAT.
So,
and then what's up?
I wanted to ask you, did you notice a trend towards politicization, I guess, of the military? Because it seems over the past year or two, the military has gotten a little bit more political.
So yes, because here's the thing. I will tell you this straight up, Matt. I knew nothing about politics up until Benghazi. Because that deployment in 2012, the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit, which carried my unit, 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, we were on the ship when Benghazi happened. We were told to gear up. That was my, excuse my language, as a new guy, that was my oh shit factor. My sergeant came in and he said, grab your kit, get down to the lower V, which is the lower levels of the boat. He's like, we're gearing up. We've got a mission briefing talking about an embassy. And the only word that we had gotten passed about that was they're overrunning the embassy. All we know now on the ground is there are a couple of former U.S. Navy SEALs that are holding out, and they're holding it down. So literally, I'm grabbing my machine gun. I'm putting my vest on. I'm grabbing my ammo. And then I'll never forget him, Gunnery Sergeant Murphy, who was with Amtrax. He hands me, Matt, this big old can of bear spray, just fire extinguisher. He's like, strap this to your chest. You might need it. I'm like, you realize I'm a machine gunner. I shoot from the prone. So I'm like, if this thing busts and hits me in the face, I'm screwed. Like, yeah. And I'm just like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, but we were getting, because I'll never forget this. They called on the boat Sparrowhawk, which was like the code name. Like, you know, we're going to have birds landing on the helicopter. You're going to load up and we're going to leave. We're going to secure Benghazi. We got all geared up. And then just out of nowhere, Matt, our sergeant comes in. He's like, put your stuff away. We got a call to stand down. And we never went. And then we sat on the boat because we have cable on the boat. We sat on the boat and watched everything happen. It was literally like reliving 9/11, except you're an adult now.
Wow.
And that's why, and you never heard this in the media, but you talk to my buddy Thompson, who I mentioned to you. You talk to anybody that was on that deployment, they will tell you we got the Benghazi.
Can you hear me, Terrence? Can you hear me? I see your camera. I can't hear your audio though. I think you're muted.
Ah, there we go.
Okay. For a
What was
second.
the last thing you heard?
You were telling me about Thompson. We were talking about Benghazi, and then you said ask your buddy Thompson. You had mentioned him to me.
You ask anybody that I'm friends with, Thompson, anyone that I served with that was on that boat. Like when we all get together, we talk about that because why? That never got. When did you ever hear that there was a battalion of Marines nearby that could have responded to Benghazi?
No, you never hear that. I didn't hear
You
much
never heard that.
about Benghazi.
You never heard that. Um, and that's the thing. My buddy, I think, is actually working on trying to piece together a small documentary about that because he's like, you watch the movie 13 Hours, you never hear once of the 24th MEU, but you heard about the 24th MEU in Kabul. Because what the MEU is responsible for, Matt, is the Marine Corps is known for we can be anywhere in the world within 24 to 48 hours. Something's happening in Japan, you can have Marines on the ground within the longest stretch of 48 hours. We can move the Marines around that much. That is because the Marine Expeditionary Units, these boats of Marines, are sailing all around the world, acting as the cop that patrols your neighborhood. So when something happens, if something happened, like for instance, Benghazi, well, guess what? There's a whole battalion of Marines that are just an hour away on a boat. Let's send them in.
So,
In Kabul, same thing.
as far as the politicization of the military, are you saying that because we could have done something and the news media never caught coverage of this, you're saying that this is when you first noticed, hey, something's fishy here, something seems political?
The politicalization of the military, it's not even the politicians not saying anything, it's my unit leaders. You had lieutenants, you had captains, you had majors, colonels, go all the way up just on the Marine Corps side, because on a MEU, the Marines are living amongst the Navy. Navy have superior command of that ship, and we serve side by side with them. So you have everybody from sergeant all the way up to general on the Marine Corps side. I don't know what the Navy ranks are, but you have everybody from the lowest rank all the way to admiral and, captains and all that. Nobody on that boat said anything. Nobody on that boat talked about why didn't we go. Nobody was asking questions. Like, if I was that captain or I was in charge of that scenario, knowing that American lives are at stake, it's like, no, we're taking what's ours. We're going to hold down the fort. That never happened. You see it in movies, and this is a good talking point. I forget his name. You see it in movies where that man says, well, I'm not obeying the command of the general. I'm going to do what's right. I'm disobeying that order because I know this is what has to be done. There is, I don't even know. I think he's a colonel. He spoke out about Afghan, Marine Corps colonel, I think he was, just recent, spoke out about Afghan, and he said the Marine Corps prides itself on enforcing self-accountability. If you mess up, you take responsibility for it. And he said, he posted a video on, I think it was Twitter. He said, I'm urging the Marine Corps leadership to take accountability for the mess up in Kabul. And I'm also calling out my president to take accountability. He's like, we pride ourselves on that, but nobody's saying anything about how screwed up Afghan is. A day after that video was published, Matt, he lost his command. He was relieved of his job.
Yeah.
And that's because he spoke out. Well, who do you think's also? It's not only the politicians, but it's the leaders above him that all right, well, we got to silence him. He's talking.
Yeah, doesn't look good.
That's when I started picking up on politics infiltrating the military, because it's not just politicians. It's not men moving chess pieces on the board anymore. It's everybody silencing everybody else, and that's how it always goes. And that's what happened. That was the first instance that I caught on to it real quick. Was that.
So, from the beginning of the war on terror in kind of 2001 and 2002, how did Afghanistan's political and military climate change from the beginning of the war to the final withdrawal? in 2014 that you were telling me about?
So, as far as that goes, the early stages of the war, because when 9/11 happened, I think I was, because we just hit our 20th, I was 9 years old. But when you talk to the older generations, and that was the other thing, we had mentioned it before. When I showed up to my unit, the guys who were in charge of me, they had done 2 and 3 deployments to the Middle East, combat roles. They're seeing the good stuff. Well, what do you think their seniors were like when they checked in? So you go back, there was an overlap of Marines being trained by other Marines who had already seen the Middle East. And then they talk about the early stages of the war were just, really, really bad, really bloody, really heavy fighting, because, you have to remember the Taliban controlled Afghan. The villagers don't know who we are. All they have is memories of what happened in the Soviet Union. So it's like every time somebody with a uniform shows up, you're like, oh, great, here we go again. You're hostile until they prove themselves otherwise. The early stages of the war, not too good on, but I do know from what I've heard from my seniors, really hard and heavy fighting. But this is where the catch is of, by the time I showed up in 2014, fast forward, it's no longer about fighting and eradicating the threat. It's the mission's literally hearts and minds. Go into these villages, earn the trust of the people, help the people, get the information, isolate the incident, isolate the combatants, eradicate the combatants. But we're going to do it through hearts and minds, which was a very good take, because it's like, because you always hear people talk about, if you kill one Taliban fighter, you've bred 5 others. Because why? He was a brother. He was a husband. He had sons. He had daughters. And all those kids know, or those relatives know, is, oh, that guy in that uniform killed my uncle. Well, you just bred a new terrorist. But their main mission by the time I showed up, Matt, was really hearts and minds. Don't piss off the villagers. Treat the people with respect. Earn their trust. If you earn their trust, they'll help us. I'm like, okay, you're right about that. But then look what we did to them in return. We can never go back to. We spent all the time fighting, and then once the fighting was done, we changed gears and said, okay, we need to get these people to trust us. We need them to understand we're not here to hurt them. We're here to implement a better way of life for them, which I'm all about. But then fast forward to what just took place. We gave them 20 years of a new lifestyle after they resisted us a little bit. I wouldn't trust somebody either. They finally trust us, and then this is how we repay them. Yeah, I get it. The war on terror, the 20-year war in Afghan had to come to a close, but you could have left something behind as a support element or some kind of a foundation.
So before we jump into what's going on with Afghanistan today, I wanted to ask you one more thing about the video that you showed me with your fellow Marine Thompson. You showed me a video of him from 2014 saying that he feared that his son would have to come back to Afghanistan one day. So I wanted to ask you, what knowledge about Afghanistan gave him this foresight at the time?
That, Matt, is literally coming from what we were personally experiencing out there. We were going to villages, and we were controlling sectors of Afghan, of our area. We were controlling those areas of operation, and we would flush out the Taliban, but like cockroaches. All right, we've cleared out this village. Well, they just moved next door. All right, boys, let's go get them. Go to the next village, clear them out. Oh, they just move next door. The fighting, we experienced some fighting out there, but it wasn't as much as what previous generations had seen. That's because the Taliban got smart. They're like, the Americans are gonna leave eventually. Why are we gonna fight and take casualties? Let's just move around. Let's evade. Let's wait them out until they leave. There's no sense in taking a casualty if we can just wait them out. And the Taliban are not stupid fighters. They are smart. They are no different than how we fought the crown during the Revolutionary War. We know the lands, we know the hiding spots, we know the highways. You know, if I dug a tunnel in the middle of the woods, I'm the only one that knows it, and anybody else I told about it. We would, I kid you not, Matt, we'd be in the middle of nowhere heading towards a village, and we'd see just this giant, what looks like a honey badger den. But you go down in there, you look in that hole in the middle of nowhere, nobody around, and it's a cache full of weapons. It's literally a underground bunker dug out, just full of weapons, rockets, explosives. Like, these people knew their land. They knew how to fight the war. They'd been fighting for centuries. You know, they knocked out the Soviets. So with what we were seeing, yes, we were helping the people. We were clearing the Taliban out, but they were just moving around. It's kind of like we knew it was a wasted effort. It's like, no sooner do we turn our backs and leave, just like what's happening on a small scale. We clear this village, we leave, they come back. We would have to physically stay here to keep them away. So we're all smart enough to know on a grand scheme, well, if they're doing this on a village, what's going to be the difference from the country if we leave? Let's put it this way. The Camp Leatherneck that I was on was one of the biggest installations for the Marine Corps. And my unit was giving it to the ANA. The ANA, you could tell by how that operation was conducted that we had no faith in the ANA. Because if we had faith in the ANA, Matt, would we need to have all the air support on call? Would we have gotten briefed from our generals, hey, when you're walking off post, you need to hightail it to the flight line and get set up. Be vigilant on your way there, because, yeah, we got threat reports that there was going to be a large-scale attack during that transition. And that video was talking about the transition to the ANA. Well, I get it, you know, be vigilant, be aware, but the Marine Corps had all of its assets on call for that transition. They were expecting something to happen. Well, if you had faith in the ANA, you wouldn't need all that firepower on call. You wouldn't have paid a lot of mind to legitimate threats. I mean, so that right there gave me a preview in the back of my mind, like, the ANA aren't equipped by themselves. They're not equipped to hold off what the ANA are fighters for money. The Taliban are fighting for ideology. That's right. That's what we knew right off the bat. When we cross-trained with the ANA, it was a culmination of those little indicators that were telling us, like, if America's not here, this whole thing that we've built will crumble.
So it was kind of inevitable.
It was kind of it's literally the best way to explain it. It's kind of like taking something that you built and there's a specific way to use it, and you're giving it to somebody that's in a completely different country, doesn't speak your language, but you're saying, this is how I need you to use this piece of equipment. He doesn't even know what you're saying. We built a democratic-based Afghanistan, and the Afghanis didn't know how to maintain it. They didn't know how to support it. They were relying on us to help them, back them up to support this. If something broke, hey, Americans, come help me fix this. We weren't there. And that's literally what was happening throughout the entire time that most of the U.S. military was there. It's just, you can't hold the Afghanis up to the American standard of military. No.
They didn't have that cultural history with democracy or a republic. So it would have taken a lot more time. So let's go ahead and transition to talking about what has been going on over the past couple months with Afghanistan. So I wanted to ask, what was your reaction when you first heard that Biden wanted to pull everyone out of Afghanistan in August rather than the original May withdrawal date? Because Trump had set that up. And what was the general reaction with the veterans that you keep in touch with?
Well, one, the first reaction when he said, well, we're getting everybody out by August. No, you're not. On a realistic standpoint, if somebody told me today, the sheriff came to my house and said, you need to be out by midnight. I want all of your stuff gone, all of your items and all of your people out by midnight. You'll say, yeah, oh yeah, I got you. But on a realistic standpoint, logistically speaking, you know it's not going to happen. That is the first thing that we all said. There are too many assets. There's too many assets, and there are too many people, and not enough external assets assisting the process to get everybody out. So, first off, when he said that, everybody's shaking their head like it's going to be a mess. You're something that should have started in May and worked all the way through the end of the year. You're trying to fit it in this tiny little box, trying to expedite a process that you can't expedite. So we knew that was going to be a mess, and two, when the extraction started, we already knew that the situation was going to deteriorate so quickly. And then watching the Taliban slowly starting to reclaim provinces when that extraction started, it was literally depressing. It was completely heart-sinking. I mean, we were there. Thousands of service members have been there fighting for territories and died for territories that were seized in a matter of hours. Honestly, Matt, there is no word to explain the rage that we all feel. The anger and the depression. It's literally like Vietnam again. And then I don't know if you've seen those images to where back during Vietnam when they did, I think it was the Saigon embassy.
The Chinook on the building. Yep.
And then I'll be honest with you, Matt, how can I have faith in a president that says we are not evacuating embassies? We are not pulling people off rooftops. And then what's that image that came out of Kabul?
Pulling people out.
I would have had more respect for you had you not said anything. I would have had more respect for you if you had said, it's going to get messy, but we're going to do it.
So how did it happen so fast? That's what I'm wondering about. This happened within like a day. It took a day. Like,
so it's kind of like, all right, because I like math so much, let's kind of think of it this way. You want to buy the new Xbox. We'll go with this. Is it better? Do you think it's better to just do it down or make a payment once a month? You're going to make a payment once a month, and then you're going to get the Xbox once you've paid it off? Or is it just easier to hoard all of your money, and then when you have all of your money, just throw all your money to it at once, pay it off at once? If you ask anybody that's been boots on the ground, the Taliban doing the peace talks was showing face. Let's put on a smile. Let's make everybody look. Let's make everybody think that we're negotiable, that we want peace. They were not, in that deal that they signed with Trump was what I was telling you before. Why am I going to fight the enemy when I can just save my resources, bide my time, and then when the time is right, instead of throwing 100 Taliban at the U.S. troops and taking casualties, let me hoard my fighters so when the timing's right, we can just flood the country with fighters. And that's exactly what happened. The Taliban are not stupid. They're like, we're going to bide our time. We'll do the peace talks. That deal with Trump. We won't attack U.S. troops, but we'll attack everybody else, which is the same thing. They're just going to evade like a mouse. They're going to run from you. And then what's going to happen is the ANA, because they're so ill-equipped and so ill-trained, they're not up to par. They're not. And we know that. So, yeah, when that time came to seize the country, all these ANA outposts that were being faced with Taliban fighters were so overwhelmed they couldn't stand a chance. So they either left post or they died defending a post. The force that the Taliban took the country with was so overwhelming. It's literally the tsunami effect. Don't fight the wave, but everybody's going to run from it. And that's exactly what happened.
So why weren't American civilians and non-military personnel pulled out first? And I can't imagine this is normal military strategy.
It's not. Anybody who's when I say a foundational American, you talk about presidents back in the day, I want to say, trying to get my history right, Matt. I'm trying to think. I don't remember. Oh, well, I think it was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. What war did that occur?
That's what starts the First World War, I believe.
So, an assassination, it doesn't, let's remove status. The assassination of one person sparked a world conflict, right? Presidents of the past, on a foundational level, you kill an American citizen, it is an act of war. If you are a foreigner, 9/11 sparked a huge world conflict, right? Any president or anybody with a foundational respect for this country, if an American citizen is in this territory, I will control this territory until everybody is out. Joe Biden was listening to the demands of the Taliban. He pulled out the Taliban don't care. Civilians are bargaining chips. Why? If I have an American, you're either going to pay or I'm just going to kill him. Either way, I get what I want. Because in the Taliban's eyes, killing a Westerner, it's no different than trophy hunting. Got me an 8-point buck, American stripes. That's what killing an American or having an American, they are worth money. Joe Biden, who went first? Who got out first, the military or the citizens?
It's the military.
Joe Biden was literally bending over and adhering to the demands of the Taliban. Taliban don't care about citizens. U.S. citizens aren't combatants. They're not a threat. U.S. military is. Joe Biden said, we're going to listen to the Taliban, get all of our military out, and then we'll come back for everybody else. What would a normal American president had said? I'm going to pull my people out.
Yeah.
When I'm done, I will leave. Anybody that's commanding a situation, like, you will listen to me. When I am finished here, I will leave. Until then, I am here. So if you want to get down with it, we're going to get down with it. But that wasn't the mentality of our president.
So how much blame are these military generals? How much did they really have to say about this? Did they even try to stop this? Do you know anything about that?
Honestly, I would say when it comes to these generals and these Department of Defense officials, they were looking out for their jobs and their paychecks more than they were looking out for American interest. Sometimes, Matt, it is worth losing your job. And that Marine colonel, he's actually in the process of separating from the Marine Corps now. He's resigning his commission. He's getting out. All the work that man did to be an officer, he's literally turning over for speaking out. And he's like, I'm fine with that. There are some things in this life that are worth losing your job. I mean, you saw it under the Trump administration. How many officials were getting fired for speaking out? There were several officials getting fired from Trump for speaking out, or we'll even look at General Mattis. Do you remember Mad Dog Mattis?
I've definitely heard the name more than a lot of other military names.
So, hardcore Marine Corps general. His nickname is Mad Dog. He's a deity in the Marine Corps. I mean, I've got an air freshener of him hanging in my car next to my Jesus stuff. So Mad Dog Mattis stepped down as the Secretary of Defense because he literally said, what President Trump wants to do and what I want to do, it's just not clicking. So I need to leave. With this whole extraction of Afghan, nobody speaking out against Joe Biden and his execution of it. Your military, and guess what? It happened to Hitler. Hitler lost the war because he didn't listen to his military advisors either. Hitler thought he knew better. Not only were his military advisors not advising him on what to do, they weren't pushing for it. They'd rather, I need to keep my stars. I need to keep my job. All right, the president says he wants everybody. Why wasn't a general? General MacArthur had said, all right, we're going to leave these civilians here and we'll be back for them later. No. All these other generals throughout history never would have done that. They would have said, we're staying here. We're going to take care of this, and then we'll leave when we're good and ready. So, yeah, not only, I'm not going to put the whole blame on Joe Biden. I am going to put the blame on our military advisors, our military officials, our political officials. Because you know why? You don't even hear anybody talking about Afghan anymore.
Mm-mm.
Where are these people say, well, Oh, I guess there are just no more American citizens in Afghan, Matt. We got that tally down to 0.
I guess so.
And then on a realistic spectrum, I mean, you're very intelligent. Do you honestly believe that if somebody told you that?
No, God, no. No, they're still back. They're still in Afghanistan. It's just not convenient. It's not convenient information anymore.
No, it's terribly damaging information for that to get out that an American president, because it also really grinded my gears when I would always hear them saying, Jen Psaki, because I don't look at people based off political affiliation, Matt. I look at people off character. I don't care if you're Democrat. I don't care if you're Republican. I don't care if you're purple. I care about your quality of character. I'm like, hey, he's a Democrat. Good for him. But he's a turd in my eyes for character foundation. So that's why I'm calling him a turd.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I am not racist. I am not homophobic. I'm not transphobic. I don't even know what the word would be for political. I'm like, no, I just hate crappy people. You will fall into my hate category if you are a crappy person. So if I say I hate, I don't hate Joe Biden or Jen Psaki for their political affiliation. I hate them for how they do the shadiness. People who want to stay in Afghan can stay in Afghan. Do you really think there's somebody that wants to stay there willingly?
No.
So why would you even say that? You are literally calling the American people stupid. The Marines who were there don't even want to be there. They're happy to be there because they're going to get some. But yeah, they'd rather be home.
So how will the military equipment that was left behind impact future conflicts with the Taliban?
So here's the thing. All the stuff that we would find in weapon caches, some of it's modern, newly built AKs, but a lot of it's the remnants of the Soviet Union. So yeah, they're messing around with old AKs, old RPGs. They might have gotten an M16 or something here and there from somebody losing a rifle or whatever. But the biggest thing is they relied on being in these villages, hiding, peeking around a corner and shooting and then running away because they didn't have armor. They don't have up-armored vehicles. Yeah, they've got machine guns, but, they don't have a solid armor plate in front of their machine gun to give them some sort of cover. They don't have any kind of tactical training, which I'll get to that. Now we have taken the Taliban, who were guerrilla fighters. They are fighting amongst the environment in which they live in with the most basic of tools. You've given them the arsenal of a conventional army. They now have modern day sniper rifles, modern day RCOs. They have night vision now, Matt. I mean, we prided ourselves in Afghan. We always said we own the night. We have night vision. We conducted a lot of operations at night. Why? Taliban don't fight at night. Well, they do, but not like they can see like we can. They have all of that now. They've got thermal optics. They've got night vision. They've got optics for their M16s. They've got machine guns with optics. They have my very same model of machine gun. They've got up-armored trucks now. So, yeah, now when we go to fight them, they're not afraid to fight out in the open anymore. They're not going to hide in the tree lines. They've become a reputable conventional force now based off arsenal. And you always see those pictures, and everybody ignores it, but it's so true. You always see those Taliban fighters holding their weapon with their finger straighten off the trigger. That's a trained characteristic. That's not a natural characteristic. When I take my wife to the range, I have to remind her, finger straighten off the trigger, because she just has that natural tendency to want to hold it there, to straighten off the trigger. So somebody who does that naturally, they were trained in doing that. We trained them. Because most of the ANA Army now, Matt, they're not getting paid by the government anymore, so where are they? They've either left the country or they're working with the Taliban. The Netflix, you can look her name up, and I'll actually send it to you. The Netflix program about 9/11, female prime minister, speaker of the House of Afghan. She was a representative of the Afghan government. She is now the chief of police for Kabul, under the Taliban regime. She now works for the Taliban. But when that documentary was filmed, she was a representative of the Afghani government. So what does that tell you? Political officials that have stayed are now political officials for the Taliban.
Yeah. It's insane. So was sending the Taliban a list of Americans that need to get out a smart move? Was that smart?
No. Because my thing of it is, we sent them that list. I'll only believe that it was a smart move. Say we sent them a list of 100 people. America got 100 people and the people that we're supposed to have. That's when I'll say, okay, yeah, it was a good move, calculated. You know, you took a risk, you took a gamble, but you got it right. If you tell me out of 100 Americans, we get 99 of them back, well, we lost, the other one's missing, we can't find them, then I will tell you that was not a smart move. On a logistical standpoint, I would say just initially, I wouldn't have done that. Because I would have said, no, we are going to hold Kabul. We are going to take this city and hold it until every American, and we will literally plow a path for people to come in and get the American citizens out. And then, yeah, we can start talking of getting Afghani citizens out, but American citizens come first. So no, I don't think that was a smart move, because now you literally just gave them a grocery list of valuable people who are worth money. If the government's not willing to pay for their release, families are willing to pay for their release. You know, so no, you literally said, here's a grocery list of all the people that are just extremely valuable because they're all American.
Exactly what you were talking about. Exactly what you were saying earlier about holding Americans hostage, and they're just tools. They're pieces of. They're to be used as a tool.
Yeah.
So tell me about this group of Marines or military personnel that actually flew their own plane into Afghanistan to save Americans.
So, and there's actually a big stir up about that right now. From what we've been told, and just what I've heard through the grapevine and talking to my other buddies, you had a bunch of former special forces. They're either retired or they're just no longer active, that went to Afghan and were literally under the radar, bringing people to the airport, going into country on their own, no backing from the government whatsoever. They're just their own equipment, their own connections. There's a lot of conspiracy theory coming out now that there were a lot of high-end, rich, conservative people stateside that were funding these operations just to get Americans wanting to help Americans. And they were calling it Operation Pineapple Express, inserting into the country, getting citizens to the airport and getting them out. And there's a whole debate now. The U.S. State Department is claiming that they facilitated that. And I knew that was going to happen, because the second I heard that these operations were happening, Matt, I'm like, the U.S. government's not going to not allow it to happen, but they're going to try to either smear it or take the credit for it. Because the fact that American citizens are doing the job of the American government shows, well, we don't need the government anymore at this point. If you're not willing to do what needs to be done, then why are you here?
Keep going.
But yeah, I haven't heard much about what's been going on with that. But the last I had heard about that was the U.S. State Department was trying to take credit and saying, no, we facilitated that. We helped them to do what they did. So the U.S. State Department's telling me you're willing to send in rogue, out of shape or just out of age special forces to save American citizens instead of using conventional army. So once again, you're getting caught in a little snare there.
That's very encouraging, though, to see other Americans willing to stand up and do something right. That's very encouraging. So, I don't know. And that's one of the more disgusting aspects of it, is just the lies that were told along the way about how, Americans, we're not going to get left behind. This isn't going to be like what happened in Saigon. We're going to get these Americans out. These Americans want to be there. Like anybody, like you were saying earlier, like any Americans even want to be there. But what options do these Americans that are still left in Afghanistan have?
So, and the problem is, you've got some civilians there that I'm sure they've got a military background, so they have a form of tactical thinking. But you have to think about the people that aren't tactically savvy, don't have that kind of, like, if that was me, Matt, I mean, if I'm trapped in Afghan and there's no American aid to get me out, I'm literally going to think to myself, like, well, I need to get out on foot. I need to just try to get out on foot and go to a neighboring country and then start working my way inward. I'm literally, if I got to walk on foot, I'd rather do that and die trying than be taken hostage and used as a bargaining chip. So, I mean, with these Americans, with anybody that's trapped there, it's like, really, it's a fight for survival. Be smart about what you're doing. If you can stay hidden, and if you're trying to hide and wait out the cavalry, then do it. But it's a really tough predicament. It's literally it's kind of a fight or flight. You either need to hold in place and hide and stay under the radar, or try to get out on foot. Because honestly, Matt, I don't believe that we're going to be sending people. We're not going to be sending any kind of conventional force to set up an area of operation to receive Americans. That's just not going to happen. The Taliban don't want any kind of military force there whatsoever. But what makes me the most upset was, like you said, all the lies that were told that are now being covered up, or not even covered up, just not even spoken about. That's the worst part, is people just don't talk about it anymore. And what actually got me most upset in recent news is the drone strike that happened in Kabul that killed some type of foreign aid, killed a civilian who they thought was a combatant. And nobody's up in arms about that. But even Obama, when he was doing his drone strike campaign, came under a lot of slack for that. But nothing's coming against the Biden administration. You literally know that you killed not a U.S. citizen, but you killed a civilian, a non-combatant, and nothing is being said about that. Whereas even Obama was literally coming under so much fire because he was in at the height of the war, and ISIS was up and becoming a thing. So we needed that kind of a campaign. The Biden administration killed a citizen that really wasn't. Why were you running that drone strike?
Why are they running drone strikes at all?
That is my question. And apparently it's, from what I've been told, because I want to say they thought it was an ISIS combatant. I guess it's a form of trying to keep balance in there, but also kind of repel or deter ISIS from moving in and getting into conflicts or whatever. I don't know much about those specifics, but that is a good question. Like, why are you, if there's no reason, there's no more any U.S. interest, we're not at war with that country anymore, why are you running drone strikes?
Yeah.
It's an ISIS combatant, but let the Taliban deal with it. You're letting them run the country, so I'm not going to come to your house, Matt, and take a tick off your ass. That's your problem. So why are we doing it in Afghan?
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
No.
So tell us, for the people at home, tell us about the first battle of Fallujah in 2004 and how that relates to the current situation in Afghanistan.
So the biggest thing about Fallujah, the reason why that was such an important U.S. interest, was that was an infestation of Al-Qaeda fighters. That was just a main hub and a geographical asset. It was just a big geographical asset for us. And what makes me the most upset was, if you've done your reading about it, you know how bloody those battles were, both of them. It was so bad that we were using tanks to clear buildings. All right, we're either going to throw a tank round into that building or just demo the building. Literally run that tank through that first floor and demo the building. It's not worth sending in Marines or soldiers to get slaughtered in a firefight inside that house. The reason why I say it relates to today, we were willing to do all of that fighting for Fallujah, which wasn't, it's not even not really a major, it's not Baghdad. It's Fallujah. It's not Baghdad. It's not a capital city. Major city, but it's not a capital city. It relates to today because we were willing to do it back then, but Kabul, which was the capital city of Afghan, the foundation of the Afghani government, but also the main extraction point for the U.S. military and any citizens that had to get out. And all we did was hold the airport. And Joe, I'll never forget this, Matt, when Joe Biden was talking about that, a reporter asked him, why don't you push the perimeter out, expand your area of operation to give a better chance of people making it to the airport? Instead of going to 1 or 2 or 3 gates, push out your perimeter so that way you can have different avenues of approach. No, that's just, we don't want to antagonize, or we don't want to aggravate Taliban fighters that would possibly spark a conflict. So you're saying we don't want to upset the Taliban? No, we should have taken Kabul back. There was more American there. I'll say it right now. There's more American interest in holding that city of Kabul than there was holding Fallujah. And we lost more people in Fallujah than we did in Kabul. Because you also have to remember, too, the Taliban could have controlled the entire country of Afghan, but at least if we had Kabul, we'd still have a base of operations. We'd still have a foothold to come in and come out of. If America needs to come back, we have a spot to do it in. Where do we have now? We don't have anywhere to go. No.
Hindsight is 2020. It's just astonishing that we just gave up the airport.
Literally just gave up the airport. And it's very astonishing too. It's either Biden didn't listen to his advisors, or his advisors were just as quiet as he was. All right, let's just get everybody out and hope for the best.
So do you think that Biden will bear the consequences in the coming election on this, or is this just another issue that can really be swept under the rug?
It'll be swept. It'll be swept under the rug. Honestly, part of me always says, there's no way he's dumb enough to run again. Not after doing what he's all done. But I have come across people that think Biden is doing a phenomenal job. Yeah, we had to leave Afghan. We had to close that door. Yeah, well, if I come to your house, Matt, and I close your door all quietly, you appreciate that. But if I slam your door every time I come in, you're a little mad about that, right? Well, what does it matter to you, Matt? I did what the main goal was. I closed the door. Doesn't matter how I did it. No, it matters how you did it. Here, you might have shut the door on Afghan. You slammed that in the face of the Afghani people when you shut that door. You didn't make a peaceful exit. You literally, it's literally, if I can make a political cartoon, America walking out and slamming the door in the face of the Afghani people, and then closing that door with a pit bull in the room with the Afghani people. That's how I interpret this situation. There are still people that think Biden is doing phenomenal. I personally think he's probably going to end up running again, even if he loses.
That's astonishing.
Because, well, that's the biggest thing is, like you said, this isn't even being swept under the rug, Matt. It's just being forgotten about. I've done Google searches at night, going to the Google tab, going on to the news, typing in Afghanistan, and nothing is coming up. Nothing is coming up anymore. Whereas, a month ago, what was your news feed full of?
It was full of Afghan.
Everything. Up to the minute updates on Afghan, and now nothing. Radio silence. And people are dumb enough to forget stuff like that. People from my unit, we won't forget Benghazi. We won't forget 9/11. We won't forget the pullout of Afghan. And that's where on the veteran community side, you always hear, oh, he's a radical Trump supporter. No, I just support what's right. I support the common sense approach. What Biden's done was not right. I'll give him props. You closed the door on Afghan. You saved American lives in that regard. But how many lives did you doom for the way that you did it?
Yeah, there's no doubt it could have been done better. And that is the softest way I can put that. It absolutely could have gone better. That's putting.
Oh, yeah.
So what does the fall of Afghanistan mean for the United States as a military power? And what does it mean for the average American? You mentioned that there was another terrorist attack that could happen as a result of this.
If you ask me, I would say something is going to come out of Afghan, and guess what? It might not even be on American soil. You remember that really bad terrorist attack that happened in France? I want to say it was in 2015.
Yes.
Taliban control Afghanistan once again. For anybody to think, Matt, I can tell you everything in the world and you can believe me on face value, but do you know what I do when I go home? You don't know what happens at my house behind closed doors. You don't know what's happening in Afghan behind closed doors. To be honest with you, they put up such a good smile on their face. I honestly think it's such a vast country with so many places to hide. Yeah, I do think it'll be a bedrock of terrorist organization training. The infection's going to go back to Afghan. Terrorist cells are going to go back. It's a terrorist wonderland. There's all this place, all this space, all this land to train, conduct your operations out of. Yeah, even if it takes 10 years to do it, because people are already forgetting about Afghan, it's going to be just a rock in the middle of a map again until the next 9/11 happens, till something else happens in a different country or on American soil. I do think, for the American people, and there were a couple of reporters that did say it, Americans aren't safe. With this pullout, giving the control of a country over, just thought of something that just really pissed me off as well. They seize that country, they dictate what happens. To think that the Taliban have cut all ties with these major terrorist organizations is, one, naive, and two, stupid. And then three, I'm pretty sure we just gave them, us and NATO allies just gave them billions of dollars in financial aid. I don't know if you've heard about that.
No, I haven't.
So a lot of, because the country's been seized by the Taliban, a lot of the country's assets have been frozen. And yes, we've given billions of dollars over to the Taliban to assist them in running the country.
Who's we? Americans?
Americans and NATO allies. You dig up an article. It's literally what's trending right now. And what's a slap in the face to us, Matt, is me and you get into a fist fight and I pay you for fighting me. Thanks. Oh man, broke my nose. Here's $20. We bombed Japan. We nuked Japan in World War II. Did we pay them? No, but we've just handed all this money over to the Taliban to help them. Now, it says it's aid to, help feed the citizens, provide healthcare to the citizens, basically kind of keep the democratic system running. Do you honestly think, Matt, wholeheartedly, the Taliban are using that money to take care of the people?
No, God, no.
Every dollar of that.
They're the Taliban. Come on.
England didn't pay us after the war. We didn't get anything.
No, we didn't. I really hope that's fake news.
I hope so. But something, I want to take a look at it now because I sat down and glimpsed at it for a quick second.
You can send it my way for sure when you find it.
Yes.
Send it my way. But got a few more questions here before we wrap up. But what can Americans that are listening to this or reading this do to help the situation in Afghanistan or prepare themselves for something that could happen as a result of what has happened in Afghanistan?
So as far as preparing themselves, the one thing the military teaches you, like when we went to these different countries, I've been to Italy, I've been to Spain, I've been to Jordan, I've been to all these places. And people know that you're military when you show up. Why? There's a damn boat in the harbor. Yeah, I'm military personnel. Whether I'm home, and it does kind of tie into PTSD. Whether I'm at home, I'm in downtown Wilmington getting a drink, you're always vigilant. You're always watching. You're always listening. You're just constant. If that dude at the bar don't look right and he's wearing a trench coat and it's 95 degrees with 100% humidity, it's something that you pick out. The biggest thing is we're not safe in our country because what you're also not hearing about is all of those Afghani refugees coming here. You've got all those Afghani refugees coming here. You've got the Mexican border crisis, which, Matt, there have been literally people who have been validated terrorists by the Department of Defense getting caught at the Mexican border, hiding amongst that wave of illegals. So because we've got so many avenues of approach now, yeah, we've got sleeper cells, or we've got radicalized people that might be acting alone as lone wolves. And that's why I say Americans aren't safe in the regard of you need to be constantly watching over your shoulder, listening to your surroundings, seeing everything around you, picking out the discrepancies. And that's honestly what Americans need to be doing, because, yeah, something trivial. You, Matt, you could be at an event and you're like, why did somebody leave a random backpack here? And just by you calling that out, you can completely turn the tide of something that could be tragic. And that's the biggest thing, is Americans need to be vigilant in that regard. You could stop something before it happens if you are paying attention. It's kind of like when we do math equations. If you're not paying attention and you miss something, you screw everything up. But if you're constantly on your guard and you're just, being a little bit more diligent, attention to detail, you'll catch something. And that's the biggest thing I would have to say about that, is Americans need to be vigilant of their surroundings at all times. And then I'd say about 6 months ago, Matt, I was literally advocating, like, when me and my wife have children, you're going to go to college or you're going to go to the military. Those are your options when you're 18. I don't even know if I want to put the military on the table anymore.
I don't even
because
know college on the table.
But you know why? Because at this point now, America doesn't go to war for we don't go to war for the right foundational reasons or the right ethical oh, you're killing a bunch of children in your country, all right, we're going to go and stop you. We don't do that anymore. We do. You hear it in the media all the time. There's no American interest there anymore. What was the American interest in World War II? There wasn't one. Somebody gave us a black eye and we kicked him in the nuts. And then we said, hey, Hitler, by the way, we're just next door. Let's go get some. That mentality doesn't exist anymore. Those 13 Marines that died in Kabul, has Biden mentioned their names anymore? He swore to avenge them, but what have you seen?
It's empty.
Nothing.
It's just air.
It's just air. There's nothing there anymore.
Yep.
You take a normal citizen, you ask anybody this, anybody that's just like me or anybody from my core group of friends, if I was sitting in that Oval Office, I would tell my generals, you will take Kabul or I will find somebody that will take it. That's what should have happened. We're taking Kabul. I will leave when I am done. Until we get leaders in the White House, until we get politicians that are like that, until we get military officials that are like that, America won't ever be safe, to be honest with you.
So do you have any final thoughts? Is there anything about Afghanistan, about the situation with the military in America today? Is there anything that you think we didn't quite touch on, or something that you want to add on to?
I mean, with Afghan, America, and I won't even say America, I'm going to say the administration, because you talk to a lot of Americans, whether they're Democrat, Republican, people are upset about this, whether they say, I agree with Biden, but people in America are still feeling for the people of Afghan, for the American citizens that are back there. We are all saddened by that. It's very hard for me to display an American flag, because it's like, the administration kind of showed his ass. We are not, when back in the day, Matt, what did Japan say when they attacked Pearl Harbor? They woke the sleeping giant. The countries won't say that anymore. Because why? Yes, Joe Biden took orders from a guerrilla force. No different than King George. When we said we're not going to do your rule anymore, we're waging a war, at least England fought us on it. We went to war with England and we won. Biden he literally listened to the demands of Taliban. And that echoes with different countries. That's going to dictate who gets involved in the next conflict with us, because they've seen how we operate.
Yeah, I mean, we're just not. we're just not we're not the big kid on the playground like we were, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's stuck in the mind of administration leaders. There's no American interest in it. So the people of Afghan aren't an American interest anymore, who we spent 20 years investing in. There's no American interest there anymore. So when you tell me that, I'm like, there's no physical capital gains for you to be here. Therefore, you won't be here. So so long as you always hear, so long as American interest is at the heart of politicians, we won't get anything done, and we will never be the big kid on the playground anymore, standing up for little Billy being bullied. That's my closing argument on that. Like, we've become Billy. We're the ones getting bullied, taking our lunch money, getting the black eyes. We're just getting beat on. And it's not even the fault of the American people. It's the fault of our leaders. And it's sad to say that, yeah, there are elected officials. And the problem that we have, Matt, is they are our representatives, not our leaders. But you heard me say leaders because we're conditioned to think of them as leaders. No, you're our representatives. You're no different than my lawyer in court. I hired you to do a job.
Yeah, Joe Biden said that his patience is running thin with the American people, and it's like, you're not my dad, man.
You're not my boss. You're my representative.
Yeah, you work for me, but clearly the Biden administration doesn't view it like that.
No, and politicians haven't viewed it like that for a long time, and that is the problem. Is the people who represent us have forgotten their place. Know your place. I mean, society's all about that. You know your place in society. You know what you can and can't do. Our elected officials have forgotten that.
Well, Terrence, thank you for your time, man. Thank you for your service. I'm sorry that our discussion was so negative, but your story and what you had to say about Afghanistan needed to be said. So I just want to thank you for your service and thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Matt. Get the story out, and anybody you come across, that's the biggest thing. Is the media is all about, they're banking on people to forget. So yeah, my last words of wisdom is be smart, be aware, and don't forget. Speak out. Because we live in the digital age to where all somebody got to do is delete.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, it was thank you for having me on. And, I look forward to future conversations with you, Matt.
Yeah. All right, Terrence. God bless, man. Thank you.
God bless, brother. See ya.
Have a good one. Bye.
You too.